Then you're now at the top of Daf Pei Dalet Amud Aleph and Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 84a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the issue of Masna al Mashakasu b'Torah. If you make a Tanai against something that is written in the Torah, is the Tanai effective? Specifically, the Gemara was discussing the situation in a case where a person makes a Tanai not to inherit his wife. Is that Tanai going to be effective or not? And the Gemara says, V'sava Rav to know Kayim. Does Rav say that the Tanai is still going to be Kayim? In other words, does Rav really say that a person is not able to be Masna al Mashakasu b'Torah? But it was learned the following machlokas amoraim. Ha'omer lechaver. Let's say a person says to his friend, Al menas she'ein loch alai ona. Person says that they're making a sale on the condition that there's no claim of ona in this situation. You can't say, let's say that I overcharged you for the sale. So Rav says, yesh lo alav ona. Rav says, no, there is still going to be a claim of ona. U'shmuel amar ein lo alav ona. And Shmuel says there is no claim of ona. So it seems to be that Rav is saying over here to know batel, that the Tanai is not going to be effective. In other words, even though the person said a condition that there should be no ona, still Rav said that there is ona. So it seems like you cannot be masna al mashakasu b'Torah. And so the Gemara says, rather halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel according to Rav. Diyamar hamasna al mashakasu b'Torah to know batel, because Rav says when Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that when somebody makes a Tanai against the Torah, the Tanai is batel. Again, that's what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. That's why Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that in this situation the husband is not allowed to make a Tanai that he's not going to inherit his wife. However, what Rav was saying was v'lav mitaime, but really it's not for the same reason that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel gave. The ilu Reb Shimon ben Gamliel savar mesa yershena, whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, he holds that if she dies, the husband inherits her, like we said, because masnal mashakasu b'Torah to know batel, you can't make a Tanai. But Rav savar, but Rav happens to disagree. In that particular case, Rav holds no mesa lo yershena. Rav says that in that case, if she dies, he does not inherit her. In other words, Rav says that in this particular case, it is an exception, and he is able to make that Tanai. Rashi over here explains. But Rav savar in mesa lo yershena, if she dies, he's not going to inherit. To kasavar Yerusha sabal derabon. In other words, Rav will hold that in this particular case of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, where we're talking about Yerusha, it happens to me, it's not a din d'oraisa, it's only a din d'rabanan, and therefore you are able to make a Tanai. We didn't say it was so strong, even though sometimes by derabanans we strengthen it as if it is a d'oraisa. Here we do not strengthen it as if it is a d'oraisa. So the idea basically is, according to this, that Rav holds masna mashakasu b'Torah to know batel. Rav holds you cannot make a Tanai against what's written in the Torah, but in this case, it's only d'rabanan. But the problem is that goes against what we said in the previous summit, because haimi taime v'lo kehilchasehu. That would mean that Rav agrees with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning, but doesn't agree with his actual halacha. But we said the opposite in the previous summit. We said that Rav agrees with his halacha, but not for his reasoning. And so the Gemara again changes it. Ela rather halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. What we mean to say is as follows: the halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, do amar im mesa yershena, because Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says again that if she dies, he does inherit her. V'lav mitame, but it's not for the reason of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The ilu Reb Shimon ben Gamliel savar b'doraisa to know batel, because Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, he holds by a doraisa you can't make a Tanai, habidirabanan to know kayim. But if it would be a din d'rabanan, you could make a Tanai. It's an implication that we draw from Shimon ben Gamliel. But Rav savar, but Rav would go further. Afilu b'dirabanan to know batel. He would say that even by a din d'rabanan you cannot make a Tanai. But the problem there is, again, it doesn't fit with what we said before, because haikataime ukehil chasehu v'Rav mosifu. That would mean that Rav agrees with the reasoning of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and he agrees with the halacha of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, and he's just adding on to the halacha of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So that can't be what we meant either. Ella, rather, what it means to say is as follows: halacha Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. The Yomar Mesa Yershena, because again, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel said that if she dies, the husband will still inherit her. V'lav mitayme, but it's not for the same reason that Reb Shimon ben Gamliel gave. The ilu Reb Shimon ben Gamliel sabra, whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, he holds Yerushas Habaldo Raisa v'chol Masna Mashakasu b'Torah to know batel. He says the Yerushas Habal is a dindo Raisa, you can't make a Tanai against it. Rav sabra, but Rav holds Yerushas Habal d'Rabbanan. Yerushas Habal is midrabbanan. The Chachamim asu chizuk l'divrayim kishal Torah, and the Chachamim treated the d'Rabbanan like a doraisa. So that's how we can understand how Rav and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel fit together. They don't fit together exactly, but again, they have slightly different reasonings. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds Yerushas Habal doraisa, and that's why you can't make a Tanai. But Rav says no, Yerushas Habal is d'Rabbanan, but still you cannot make a Tanai because the Chachamim treated the d'Rabbanan like the doraisa. And the Gemara continues, Rav savar Yerushas Habal d'Rabbanan. Does Rav really hold that the inheritance of a husband of his wife, is that really a din d'Rabbanan? But we learned in a Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says, Hayoresh es ishto. Let's say a person inherits his wife. So the halacha is yachzir livnei mishpacha v'yenachal lehen min adamim. So he has to return it when the yovel comes. He has to return that property to the original family, to his wife's family. But he should, when he takes compensation, because really it's his inheritance, when he takes compensation from them, he should subtract a little. He should sell it for a low price back to them. The Gemara says, but we asked on that Mishnah, on this sheet of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, what exactly does Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka hold? If he holds that the inheritance of the husband of his wife's property is a din doraisa, so Amai Achzer, why should he have to return it at all? Who cares at the Yovel time? Why should it go back to the wife's family? It should stay with the husband. He inherited it on a doraisa level. Now, if his inheritance is derabanan, so then why is he getting any compensation? Of course it should go back to the original family at the time of the Yovel. V'yomer Rav, and so Rav said on that, Li'olam kasavar Yerushas Abal Doraisa. Really, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka holds that the Yerusha of the husband is a Doraisa. This is the basis of our question, because we just said before that Rav holds Yerushas Abal is Derabanan, and now Rav is saying within Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka that the Yerushas Abal is Doraisa. But really, anyways, he holds it's a Doraisa. Uchegon shehorishto ishto beis hakvaros. But the case over here is this piece of property. It wasn't just any piece of property. It was a beis hakvaros. It was their personal family cemetery, mishum pagam mishpach, and that would be a pagam mishpach. If you're going to start burying people from another family there, that would be something that would be considered degrading to them, and therefore that kind of property should be returned. Amar Rabbanan, therefore the Rabbanan said, lishkol demei v'lahader, he should just take compensation, he should return the property. Now, so what does it mean that he should deduct a little? Why not take the fair market value for that property that he's giving back? And to that the Gemara says, demei kever ishta, we're referring to the value of the fact that the husband's responsible to bury his wife. So for that particular plot, there should be no compensation. And the Gemara continues, Kedetanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Hamocher Kivro, V'derech Kivro, Ma'amodo, U'makom Hespedo. Let's say a person sells these kind of properties, the area of his burial, these are personal burial plots, or even the path towards the burial plot, or the area of the Maimin where they would stand at the time of the funeral, or the area of the eulogy. So in all of those cases, Boin B'nei Mishpacha, V'kover so Balkarcho, the people of the family, they can say, no, we're going to use it, you're not allowed to sell this property, bury him against his will over there, Mishum Pegam Mishpacha, because again, it's considered a pagam mishpacha to have strangers buried in this family burial spot. In any case, we have a question in Rav. What exactly does Rav hold in terms of Yerushas Habal? We said before he holds Yerushas Habal as Derabanan, and yet now within Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, he's saying that it's Doraisa. And the Gemara says, Rav l'taimid Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka ka'amar v'lei lo svirole. Rav was just explaining what Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka held, but he himself didn't hold like that. That's how we can resolve the contradiction within Rav. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha meis v'hiniach isha ubalchov v'yarshin. Let's say a person dies, he leaves over a wife, he leaves over a balchov that he owes money to, and he also has yarshin, they are inheritors who want to take his property. And now there are also people who owe this guy money who died. There's either a pikadon, there's a deposit that's by somebody else, or maybe there was a milva, there's a borrower out there who owes him money. So who is able to collect these funds? Rabbi Tarfon says, Yinosnu la koshel shebehen. It should be given to the weakest of them. If you're going to give it to the Yarshim, then the others are not going to be able to get it at all. It should be given to the weaker of the people who are making the claim. The Gemara will explain that. Rabbi Akiva says, Ein merachmin bedin. We don't have mercy when it comes to justice. Eli yinasnu liyarshin. Rather, the money should be given to the inheritors. They're the primary ones who are in line for the money. Shakulan srichan shvua. Because when it comes to these individuals taking this money, everybody needs to take an oath. However, in general, ve'ena yarshin srichan shvua. When it comes to yarshin, they don't need to take an oath to collect. You see that they are the primary ones in line for the money. And the Gemara continues, Hiniach peros telushin min akarka. Let's say the person who died, he left over fruits that are detached from the ground. So kol hakodem behen zocha behen. Whoever gets them first, again among this group, the Isha, the Balchov, and the Yarshin, whoever gets it first takes it. Zochsa Isha yoser michsubasa, ubalchov yoser alchovo. Now let's say the wife, she took, but it's more than the value of her ksuba. Now there's a surplus. Or let's say the Balchov took for himself, he's the one that grabbed it, but it's more than the debt, so there's a surplus. Hamoser, what do you do with the extra? Rabbi Tarfon Omer, Rabbi Tarfon says, again, yinosnu lakoshel shebehen, you give it to the one with the weakest claim. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, no, ein merachmin bedin, we do not have mercy when it comes to justice. Ela yinosnu liyarshin, rather you give it to the inheritors. Shekulam tzrichen shvua, because everybody needs to take an oath when collecting their money. V'ein hayarshin tzrichen shvua, and the yarshin, the people who are inheriting, they don't need a shvua. So again, it's going to go to the yarshim. And the Gemara says, Lamali lemisni milve, lamali lemisni pikadon. Why do you have to say that there's a situation where he's owed money through a loan, and then there's also a situation where he's owed money from a deposit? It seems to be identical. And the Gemara says, no, tzricha, you do need both cases. The itan of milve, because if the Mishnah only taught the case of milve, so we would say, Bahaka, Amar Rabbi Tarfon. In that situation, Rabbi Tarfon says, you give it to the one with the weaker claim, mishum de milve lahotza nitna, because milve is something that is spent by the borrower. It's not the actual money that belongs to the malva. It's just that there's a debt that is owed to the malva. There's a debt that is owed to the person who has died, and therefore in that situation we say the yarshim don't have such a claim. You can give it to the weaker one. Aval pikadon, but maybe by a pikadon, the isa be'eni, which is sitting right in front of us, that's the exact object that belonged to the mace. So ema modi leila Rabbi Akiva. Then maybe Rabbi Tarfon would admit to Rabbi Akiva that we don't have mercy, but we say instead that it goes straight to the yarshim. V'itana baha kama Rabbi Akiva. And again, if we had it by the pikadon, let's say it only said pikadon, I would say only pikadon goes directly to the yarshim. Aval bahach ema modi Rabbi Tarfon. But if it was just a debt that was owed, maybe Rabbi Akiva would admit to Rabbi Tarfon that you give it to the weaker, the one with the weaker claim. And so the Gemara says tzricha. That's why we need both the case of milva and the case of pikadon. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Maila Koshel. Again, when it said at the beginning of the Mishnah, so it said you give it to the weaker one. But in the case in the beginning of the Mishnah, we don't know who's weaker. Is it going to be the claim of the wife who's collecting with her ksuba, or is it going to be the claim of the Baal Chov, who is a creditor who also he's collecting with a shtar? Which one is considered weaker? We know, of course, that the Yarshim are not going to be the weakest of them, but if it's between the wife and the Baal Chov, that's the question, who's the Koshel? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina says, L'Koshel Sheberaya. You give it to the one who is weaker in terms of their evidence. Rashi over here says that means L'Koshel Sheberaya, L'Misha Shtaro Me'ucher. It means whoever has a later shtar, a later date on the shtar, Shalo Yucha Litrof L'Kuchos HaKodmim Lo. That person has a weaker claim because the halach is with a shtar, you're allowed to collect. There's a lien on the property, and you're allowed to collect from people who bought things from the person who owed you money, who bought property from the person who owed you money. However, you're only allowed to collect if that property was bought after the date in the shtar. So if you have a later date, you have a weaker claim. There are less people that you're able to collect from because the lien started later on. So that's the weaker one, the one who has a later date in the shtar. Rabbi Yochanan says, L'chsubas isha. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, it's actually the wife is always considered to be the koshel. She's always considered to be the one with the weaker claim, so to speak, misham chena, because we're trying to curry favor, so that women are going to, so that the men and the women are able to get married. As Rashi over here says, L'chsubas isha hi kriya koshel. She's always considered the koshel. She'ein darka l'chazer achar nechsei hameis. It's not normal that she's going to go after the property of the wife. It's not befitting for her to go pursue the property of the person who died. To try to figure out where's their land that she can collect. And why is that? Because of favor. It means to say that the men find favor in the eyes of the women. And we don't want women to be worried that they're going to lose out on their ksuba. We want it to be easy for them to collect. So therefore, when they get married, they'll be eager, so to speak, to get married to these husbands because they know that their ksuba is going to be secure. And so therefore, that's why Rabbi Yochanan says the koshel is the ksubas isha. And the Gemara says ketanai, it's actually machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Binyamin omer lekoshel sheberaya v'hu kosher. Rabbi Lazar omer leksubas isha misham chayna. So again, it's machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Binyamin says it's the weaker, the one who has the weaker raya v'hu kosher, means that, and that is the appropriate thing to do, to give it to the person with the weaker raya. And again, Rabbi Lazar says no, ksubas isha, that's automatically considered to be the weaker claim, and that's because of chayn. Again, we want the husbands to find favor in the wives' eyes. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Hiniach peros hatlushin. So then the Mishnah said, let's say he leaves over, the person who died leaves over fruits that are detached from the ground. So the Mishnah said that whoever gets it first is able to get it. And then there was a machlokas, let's say there's a surplus, she takes more than the ksuber, the Baal Chov takes more than the debt. So then we had another similar machlokas, Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Tarfon says you give it to the one with the weaker claim, meaning not the Yarshim. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, you give it to the Yarshim. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva, Ma'ir Yamoser Kulunami de Yarshin Havi. But according to Rabbi Akiva, why is he saying the surplus goes to the Yarshim? Rabbi Akiva already said in the beginning of the Mishnah that it all goes to the Yarshim. We say it always goes to the Yarshim. Everything, not only the surplus, the whole thing. And the Gemara says, Inochinami. Indeed, that's really correct. Really, everything according to Rabbi Akiva goes to the Yarshim. Va'aydi dam Rabbi Tarfon Moser. But since Rabbi Tarfon was talking there about the extra, because according to Rabbi Tarfon, again, whatever was taken, and then there was a question what to do with the surplus. So since Rabbi Tarfon was talking about the surplus, so Tana Iyunami Moser, so Rabbi Akiva also talks about the surplus, but again, really, according to Rabbi Akiva, everything goes to the Yarshim, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pedalid Amud Beis.